trade deal with Mexico. President Trump says there's more than meets the eye on his agreement to avoid tariffs. We're at the White House. Protesting China, why hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets yesterday in Hong Kong. Reaffirming church teaching. Small group of cardinals and bishops release a document to combat what they call confusion over Catholic doctrine. We have a report from Rome. And something to build on. A church in Spain receives good news after more than 135 years. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, June 10th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. No tariffs for Mexico as President Trump this weekend struck an immigration deal. He says the Mexican government has committed to deploy 6,000 National Guard troops to southern Mexico to stop the flow of migrants heading north. The deal is not without political controversy here in the U.S., and that's where we bring in White House correspondent Mark Irons. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president's threat to place tariffs on Mexican imports coming to the U.S. caused talks to ensue between the two countries. Now we're hearing debate about what the agreement actually accomplishes. As President Trump promises, there's even more to come.
President Trump says his threat to slap tariffs on Mexico pressured the country to respond. He writes, Mexico has agreed to take strong measures to stem the tide of migration through Mexico and to our southern border. Mexico's commitment includes deploying 6,000 National Guard troops to the border with Guatemala to stem the flow of migrants from Central America and returning U.S. asylum seekers to Mexico as they wait out their cases. Neither measure is entirely new. The country says it's just accelerating its prior commitment to deploy National Guard troops, and about 10,000 U.S. asylum seekers have already been returned to Mexico. Mexico's foreign minister adds, just because someone wants to move, that doesn't make them a criminal. But he does want migrants to register so Mexico can keep track of people moving through the country. Democrats criticized the deal. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tweets, in February, Donald Trump declared a bogus emergency to build a wall he said will solve immigration. Then he made a bogus tariff threat even GOP and Congress rejected. Now he claims a bogus deal Mexico volunteered to do months ago. Common thread? All bogus. We all know it. President Trump pushes back. If President Obama made the deals that I have made, both at the border and for the economy, the corrupt media would be hailing them as incredible, and a national holiday would be immediately declared.
Wall Street likes the news. Stocks jumped this morning after the threat of tariffs was dropped. And President Trump teased there's even more to the deal that will be revealed in the not too distant future. Now, this could all resurface in 45 days when the U.S. and Mexico evaluate their agreement to see if it's working. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Joining me now is Alfonso Aguilar, president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles. Welcome back to our broadcast. Nice to see you.
Happy to be here.
Let's get politics out of the way, shall we? Does it really matter if the president got this deal, as he says, based on the threat of tariffs, or if it's just an acceleration of things that were already in place? The New York Times piece yesterday referred to him as the threatener-in-chief.
Well, look, it was a risky proposal to slap tariffs if Mexico didn't comply. We don't want to see tariffs long term because they can hurt our economy. They can certainly hurt Mexico's economy. But the threat worked. The president got his way. We have now a commitment from Mexico to intensify their efforts to stem the flow of migrants that are crossing their territory to get to our southern border. Remember, in May, we had about 140,000 migrants reach our southern border. That means that they're going through through Mexican territory, and the Mexican authorities are doing very little. So the idea of sending 6,000 National Guard troops to their border with Guatemala, it makes a huge difference. It was done over 10 years ago, and it's really stemmed the flow. We've expanded the Remain in Mexico policy, so people waiting, they're going to wait in Mexico after they apply for asylum. That really helps our processing of people at the southern border. So this is a great accomplishment. A lot of it was being negotiated.
There we go.
But it was the threat that led to finally reaching an agreement. So it's a big thing.
Does Mexico have the resources to meet the proposal of 6,000 troops and care for migrants detained there?
Yes, I think they've done it in the past. But something that's missing in all of this is, despite the threat, we've never seen this type of collaboration in a long time between the United States and Mexico. So ironically, despite the threat, our relationship, our collaboration with Mexico on migration and security matters has improved dramatically. It's certainly better than it was under Obama.
Well, let's take a look at the root causes, because so many people just, talk about the politics of this, and now we have some solution to put the National Guard troops there. But really, why are people fleeing? What are your solutions to stop the overall crisis?
Well, look, there are economic reasons. There's a lot of violence in the Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. There are things actually that are out of our control. So what we have to work on is managing the flow. In the past, we've sent them a lot of money. President Trump suspended that. I don't think that's a good idea. But we also signed a trade agreement with those countries during the Bush administration, and still things haven't improved there. I think part of the problem is there's a lot of corruption in those countries. Those are things that we can try to help them fix, but they're going to have to fix for themselves. So at the end, what we have to do is look at the security issue and managing the flow of migrants. Again, I think the president's doing the right thing. I think the collaboration with Mexico is extraordinary. Hopefully, it will continue to improve. That's the way we manage the situation.
Alfonso Aguilar, President of Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
On Capitol Hill, conservatives issue a rare rebuke of President Trump's pick for a federal judgeship in Michigan. 3 Republican senators tell us they are no votes on Michael Bogren because of his legal arguments against a Catholic farmer. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason-en-Calvi has been following this story. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Bogren's conservative defenders say a lawyer should not be punished for how they defend a client. They warn it sets a dangerous precedent. But that's not convincing the March for Life Action or the Family Research Council. These conservative groups have urged senators to vote no on Michael Bogren. They cite his position on religious freedom. I talked to 3 Republicans who plan to vote against the nominee.
The concern is very significant on the Republican side.
Missouri Republican Josh Hawley leads the opposition of Michael Bogren.
I can't vote for someone who says that he sees no legal distinction between faithful Catholics adhering to their church's teaching of the Bible and the KKK invoking Christianity to cover their racism.
Bogren represents the city of East Lansing. It accuses a Catholic farmer of discrimination for refusing to hold a same-sex wedding at his orchard.
Senator, the point I was
Is that your answer?
Senator, the point I was trying to make was that religious beliefs trying to justify discrimination, if extended to sexual orientation, which the city of East Lansing protects, could be used to try to justify any other sort of discrimination.
Catholic Tom Tillis is also voting no.
When you take a look at the religious freedom issue that was at stake, that's just not the way. That's polarizing. It's just not the way to handle it, in my opinion.
Senator Ted Cruz tells me the president should withdraw the nomination.
I believe that testimony renders him unsuitable to serve at a lifetime appointment as a federal judge.
Senator Joni Ernst is still deciding.
Religious freedoms are really important to me, so we're going to have to vet him.
Conservative Margot Cleveland defends her cousin's testimony.
We can't expect judges to say how they would rule on something, so him sort of backtracking would be saying how he would rule in the case. He was talking about what he said in the brief, and what he said in the brief was not the KKK is Catholic. He's Catholic. I'm Catholic. He's not a bigot.
Both of Michigan's Democratic senators gave their approval on Bogren. That's needed for these federal court nominations, and it could lead Democrats on the Judiciary Committee to vote in his favor. But if all Democrats oppose and 2 Republicans vote no, it would sink the nomination. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason-en-Calvi, thank you. A political crisis in Hong Kong as hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets in protest of a highly controversial extradition bill. Protesters say the bill will erode their civil liberties and allow the government in Beijing to go after political and religious leaders. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The organizers of yesterday's mass protest are calling for more demonstrations this Wednesday. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he shares his concerns with the protesters. Even with all the backlash, Hong Kong's leader is still pushing this extradition bill, which she says will protect human rights. But many disagree, and that's led to clashes with police.
Police struggled to disperse protesters in Hong Kong overnight as they used batons and pepper spray to move the crowds away from the city's Parliament building. This just hours after hundreds of thousands of demonstrators rallied against legislation that would allow people to be extradited to mainland China to face charges. Organizers claim more than 1 million citizens took part in what was likely Hong Kong's largest protest in more than a decade. The leader of the semi-autonomous area, Carrie Lam, says she has listened to the protesters, but says the proposed bill is good for Hong Kong in the long run.
There are severe deficiencies and gaps in our existing system to deal with cross-border crimes and transnational crimes.
Prominent Hong Kong activist Agnes Chow is not happy with that response. She says Lam had ignored the anger from over 1 million of Hong Kong's citizens.
I felt, not only me, but I believe that most of the Hong Kong people felt really angry on Carrie Lam's response to our rally.
And so do many others. Citizens in the former British territory are allowed to voice their opinions more openly than mainland China. That includes freedom of religion. A little over 500,000 people in the region are Catholic. Cardinal Joseph Zen, Bishop Emeritus of Hong Kong, has long been critical of the atheist communist-led government in Beijing. He and other Catholic leaders have pushed for more political freedom and basic human rights.
State Department officials agree that China needs to stop opposing freedom of worship and freedom of the press. Sam Brownback, the ambassador for international religious freedom, told us right now China is, quote, in a full frontal offense against all faiths, including Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. A massacre in a tiny Mali ethnic village kills at least 95 people. It was the latest attack in the central part of the country. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the violence. And lawmakers in Costa Rica are considering a bill threatening the seal of confession. The proposal would require Catholic priests report cases of suspected child abuse they hear during confession. The sponsor says he was inspired by similar legislation in California. Costa Rica is more than 70% Catholic. A Catholic priest in Poland is in the hospital after being attacked by a man with a knife. The priest, who was not named, underwent surgery for chest wounds and is in stable condition in Wrocław. The assailant has been detained. The motive for the attack is not clear. A bishop close to Pope Francis has been formally accused of sexually abusing seminarians in Argentina. Bishop Gustavo Zanchetta is accused of aggravated continuous sexual abuse. He resigned suddenly as Bishop of Oran in Argentina in 2017. He was given a senior Vatican administration position a few months later. The Holy Father recently revealed Zanchetta is on canonical trial at the Holy See. And the Vatican confirms changes to the Italian liturgical translation of the Our Father and the Gloria. The second to last line of the Our Father will change from lead us not into temptation to do not abandon us to temptation. And in the Gloria, and on earth people peace, and on earth peace to people of goodwill, now is translated to peace on earth to men loved by the Lord. The Italian Bishops' Conference approved these changes during their General Assembly last year. A small group of cardinals and bishops have signed a new document reaffirming key church teaching. It comes at a time they describe as almost universal doctrinal confusion. The 8-page document published today begins with a reassertion of the fundamentals of the faith, stressing new insights cannot be contrary to what the Church has always upheld, and must shun those formulas that distort or alter the truth. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Ed, tell us what else is in this 40-point document.
Right, Lauren. Well, they really go into all of the difficulties that there have been over the past 6 years, where there's been ambiguity on key teachings, such as, for example, capital punishment. There was a change to the Catechism last year to that the Pope made, and some people say, well, that wasn't in line with the tradition of the Church, because the Church has condoned capital punishment when it's been very necessary. So they make that statement. They also talk about Amoris Laetitia. Well, they don't say it explicitly, but they refer to ambiguities within that document, which the dubia, the 5 famous dubia, tried to resolve. They try to give clarity on that. And other issues like such as whether hell exists, that's been open to question apparently over the last few years. They reaffirm that really does exist, and other issues. So all in all, it very much clarifies those issues where there's been ambiguity over the past few years.
Well, who wrote this document? How much weight does this carry?
Right. Well, it's only been signed by 5 bishops, 2 cardinals, one of whom's retired. Cardinal Burke is also one of the signatories, Cardinal Raymond Burke, and 3 Kazakh bishops. So not very many. And the Kazakh bishops, of course, would be considered sort of on the periphery. But on the other hand, it doesn't really matter. The supporters will say that it's important that this sort of document is produced, and it doesn't matter if it's just 1 bishop or 5. It's important that these clarifications are made.
Now, the Vatican published another document today, this one on gender theory, saying that the Church is open to dialogue on sexuality, but reaffirms the Church's teaching. So basically, this is a yes to dialogue, but a no to change in ideology?
Yes, it's very much in line with the Second Vatican Council, Lauren, which is to dialogue with the world and to really show that the Church is open and inclusive about it, while at the same time reaffirming the Church's teaching and its opposition to an issue such as gender theory and gender ideology. And this document very much does that. Critics will say, well, you can't really dialogue with these people who support gender theory because they'll never accept the Church's teaching on this. But others welcome it because gender theory is very much in public discourse at the moment and needs to be addressed.
At least here in the U.S., there have been several articles very critical of this document from the secular media. All right, Ed Penton, thank you so much, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, the bishops' meeting for the U.S. starts tomorrow in Baltimore. We'll have a preview. And new details in the case of the remains of Bishop Fulton Sheen. Archbishop William Lori released a report to the Vatican last week about a former West Virginia bishop. The report accused Bishop Michael Bransfield of improper use of church money. And now Lori says that he should not have redacted the names of clergy, including his own, who received money from Bransfield. Lori received around $8,000 of $350,000 Bransfield distributed. Lori says he returned the money and asked the diocese to donate it to Catholic charities. The U.S. Catholic bishops will focus on the clergy's sexual abuse crisis during their meetings starting tomorrow in Baltimore. The bishops are under pressure to acknowledge their oversight failures and give a larger role to lay Catholics in confronting the scandal. The meetings will last until Friday. The head of a Catholic lay organization says bishops should ask for more help from the faithful in the cleansing of the church. Tim Bush, who is the head of the Napa Institute and a member of EWTN's Board of Governors, writes in an op-ed in USA Today, regular Catholics are especially well suited to holding the church's leaders accountable. We have no institutional incentive to cover up sins and crimes, and we want the church to be healthy and holy. Stay with EWTN News Nightly for comprehensive coverage of the bishops' meeting. We will be in Baltimore with reports and analysis, and EWTN will also air portions of the General Assembly starting at 9 Eastern tomorrow morning. The Archdiocese of New York says it will cooperate in transferring the remains of Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen from St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan to Peoria, Illinois. The decision brings an end to a long legal battle over his burial place. You may have seen him on EWTN. Archbishop Sheen, known for his revolutionary radio and TV preaching, was a beloved television catechist in the United States during the 50s and 60s. Sheen was ordained a priest of the Diocese of Peoria and at the age of 24 and was appointed Auxiliary Bishop of New York in 1951 and Bishop of Rochester, New York. He retired in 1969 and lived in New York City until his death in 1979. Joining me now by Skype from Edmond, Oklahoma is Rosemarie Costello, a relative of Archbishop Fulton Sheen. Rosemarie, welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen, about the man himself. Your grandmother was his cousin, I understand?
Yes, they were cousins. They grew up together in Peoria, Illinois. And he was just, as a young child growing up, he was like a grandfather to me and my siblings. We were very close, and he was wonderful and warm and loving, just as you would imagine. And even as children, as young children, we could sense his holiness and his closeness to God, which always...
He played Cupid for your parents, too?
Sure did. He introduced my parents. My father lived with them for a time in New York City, and my mother, the bishop, met my mother at St. Aidan's Church in Jersey City during Lenten talks. And yes, he introduced them at one of his telecasts.
It is telecast.
Yes.
How fabulous is that? And he was there for your christening and your confirmation. So how has this long court battle affected you and your family?
Well, it hasn't affected us personally, but it certainly has saddened all of us, as we already know the bishop to be a saint. We were told that by our mother all growing up, and we feel that he truly is a saint. And now we just want the Catholic Church to regard him as such.
Well, Archbishop Sheen has been interred under St. Patrick Cathedral altar since his death in 1979, and they hold a connection for your family as well. So this has been really a battle, and it's going to affect, it has affected his cause for sainthood. Tell us about the connection to St. Patrick's.
Well, the bishop lived in New York and introduced my parents there, married them at St. Patrick's, baptized all my 5 siblings and myself, gave us other sacraments as well, and myself and my 3 sisters were all married at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and my daughter Carly was also married there too, just last couple years ago. So it's a very special place, and just having the bishop there has been very special. But he was from Peoria, so was our grandmother, and we love Peoria as well. So it's definitely been difficult for our family.
How does the transfer of his remains help to advance the cause for his sainthood?
Well, as I understand it, the sainthood cause will be more easily advanced if he is in Peoria, since they are sponsoring the cause. And he was very close to beatification before the cause was paused several years ago. So we're very hopeful and prayerful that it will continue and beatification will be soon to come.
Well, it was wonderful to see all of those pictures. And I'm so grateful to you for coming on and telling us a little bit more about the man. Rosemarie Costello, relative of Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Up next, Pope Francis welcomes some first-class guests to the Vatican, and an update on unfinished business at a church in Spain. Women in Germany carry a centuries-old statue of the Virgin Mary to mark Whit Monday. Wearing traditional white dresses, they carried the statue through the town of Rosenthal before attending an open-air mass. The feast is the day after Pentecost and a national holiday. Pope Francis welcomes a group of 400 children to the Vatican. The Holy Father gave them advice for the future, including saying they should never talk behind people's backs. The group arrived from Genoa by the children's train. It's an annual trip organized by the Holy See and Italy's national train company. Finally tonight, a church in Spain receives a work permit from City Hall. Doesn't seem like it should mean much. Construction started 137 years ago. Work on La Sagrada Familia Basilica in Barcelona began in 1882. Their central towers still need to be completed. And now, this new construction permit, the only construction permit, is valid until 2026. Builders believe that should be enough time to complete the project. More than 4 million people visit that church every year. What's the saying? Better late than never, I guess, right? For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter, Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.